Hey, all, welcome back to a Friday, March 7th, 2025 edition here on the Chase Thomas podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Thank you guys for joining today's episode of the program. Last one of the week here as we get into a jam-packed weekend of Tennessee sports with St. Bonaventure coming in this afternoon and this evening for a 3-game set against Tony Vitello's Tennessee baseball team. We've also got Tennessee basketball wrapping up the regular season against South Carolina on Saturday, and then tournament time next week as well. So it's about to be jam-packed with basketball and baseball and spring practice starting for football on this chilly Friday morning here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So all kinds of great stuff going on here in the Tennessee sports space. We've got Ball Report's Ryan Sylvia on today's episode of the program. We talk about what happened to Tennessee against Ole Miss on Wednesday night, their 1-seed chances after the loss, what to make of Igor Milicic Jr.'s play of late for Tennessee. We dive into a little bit of what to expect from the Gamecocks on Saturday against the Vols, questions about the Lady Vols after getting bounced in the SEC tournament in Greenville against Vanderbilt on Thursday, and questions about Kim Caldwell's scheme to this point, and just what might change in 25 to avoid some of what's plagued them this year, especially down the stretch for Coach Caldwell's team. And then Sara Puckett and what to make of her season as a whole for the Lady Vols women's basketball team. So jam-packed Friday show, as always, for you guys with Ryan Sylvia of Ball Report. Don't forget, folks, make sure you're subscribed if you are not already and you're watching this show for the first time. It's a daily Tennessee Vols sports podcast that you can watch each and every day here on the YouTube channel for Chase Thomas Podcast. So make sure you subscribe if you like what you hear today. Make sure you like this video and share it with a friend, family member, coworker, whoever else who is a Tennessee fan who might also like some new content to listen to as well. You can get in touch with the show at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. And you can also comment below. Let me know what you think of today's episode and join the conversation in the comments here on this channel. So youtube.com, like and subscribe, share it all that good stuff. And without further ado, Uncle Darren, let's go.
The Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me from ballreport.com, it's Mr. Ryan Sylvia. Ryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. We were just talking before the show. Just got back from beautiful Greenville, South Carolina. So it really feels like that's kind of the kickstart to postseason for me is when I make that trip over to Greenville. So it feels like March Madness now, which is my personal favorite time of the year is getting that first week of March Madness. You get the quad box going on the TV and all that. So I'm excited for basketball here as we kind of creep in later and later into March.
I know a lot of people who really love Greenville. Like Greenville, South Carolina has a very positive, I don't know what it is. I've only really ever driven through it. I've never really stopped in Greenville. I mean, did you stop and see some sights at all in Greenville?
I've made my way around somewhat in Greenville just because we've been there for like the last 3 years to cover the Lady Vols. But I like the city. I think it's a nice town. Like it's a good kind of Knoxville-sized town where it's like it's a city, it's a real place, but it's not, like the capital type. I don't know. It depends what capital you look at, but you know what I mean. Like, it's not huge in this overwhelming situation. So I like the city. That arena is not my cup of tea. I don't like all that tournament. There's a lot of stuff there that is a pain to deal with, but we always survive. It always feels like media complaining. It's always like, dude, we have it nice. So you can only complain so much, but it's definitely, I enjoyed when the women's tournament was at Bridgestone in Nashville way more than Greenville, but I understand why they like their spot in Greenville better.
In completely unrelated news, Ryan Sylvia, I've been waiting on this announcement for a while, but Bosch Legacy's final season got announced for March 27th, and me and all of my boomer friends have never been, boomer dads have never been more ready for Bosch Legacy to wrap up here and to come back on my television screens. And my favorite detective on screen, I'm so ready for this. I'm not gonna lie. It just was it, and they're also announcing a spinoff. Mayor of Kingstown, Bosch Legacy. There's some shows that are just absolutely in my wheelhouse. And Bosch Legacy, like when I saw it, like I've just been waiting because it's been a while. And the writer strike just pushed everything back. So I've gotten Yellow Jackets back here the last couple of weeks. So my wife and I have been loving that. White Lotus is back. We've got Bosch Legacy though is like I'm all in on Bosch, and I just got to tell you, even with all the bad vibes with Tennessee men's and women's basketball here over the last 24 hours, can't keep me down, Ryan Sylvia, because Bosch Legacy is back.
I hate to do this to you. I have never heard of this in my entire life.
Yeah, you're too young. It's not your demographic, Ryan. It's for all of us. It's all either you have the heart and soul of a 55-year-old man like myself, or you actually are in that demographic, because that's who it's for, and we appreciate it.
I googled it as you said it. I did spell it like Chris Bosch and not how it's actually spelled. I found it. I have no clue what any of this is. But I'm happy for you, man. I'm happy that you have this light at the end of the tunnel right now to get you through the day.
I mean, it's great. Like no matter how Tennessee fares in March Madness, you know what I've got right around the corner? Got Bosch Legacy just waiting for me.
There we go.
I love it.
I need like that.
Oh man, it's great stuff. Speaking of Tennessee basketball here, 24 hours later, that was brutal. Last night in Oxford, it was definitely in play. Like Chris Beard and Ole Miss, they're a good team. It's not a bad loss. Winning on the road in the SEC is always difficult this year, but it was a game where the second half was just a nightmare for a multitude of reasons. And I think most Vol fans, and I think you and I probably would have said before the second half started, it's like that's the kind of half Tennessee. It's like, yeah, this is all shaping up for a Tennessee win. Like that was a good way for Tennessee to handle. I mean, they shot the ball really well. Like it was one of those where it's like, oh, the offense is there. On the road, the defense will clamp up. The Ole Miss is not going to continue to shoot like this, and they'll just lock this down. And it's a good offensive night. So it's just a recipe for a Rick Barnes win on the road. And obviously, it did not go that way. And we're going to talk about kind of like how similar kind of Coach Caldwell and Coach Barnes teams really look gassed of late here down the stretch. Barnes, you completely understand with just the small rotation. I mean, we got some serious Bishop Boswell minutes a little bit too, which we have not really seen as much. And he was good. Like Boswell had some great defensive minutes, and I came away very impressed with his game last night. But 24 hours later, what are you still thinking about from the Vols loss to the Rebs in Oxford?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You look at that loss, and it's a good Ole Miss team. They're probably coming in as like an 8 seed, somewhere around there right now. So it's not a bad team by any means. You're on the road. You're in the SEC. It's going to be tough. I think it's a game that if Tennessee lost a month ago, you just kind of go, oh, well, and you move on. But given the circumstances that came around it, that you're coming off that Alabama win and that 1 seed, it was never like a for sure you have the 1 seed, like, but it was you're in the driver's seat for it. It was a you control your own destiny type of deal, where if you win out in the regular season in 2 winnable games and you maybe even win just 1 game, maybe you don't need to win a game in the SEC tournament, depending on how much they really care about what teams do in Nashville. You had that 1 seed on the line. And so when you go to Oxford with that on the table and you're not able to pull it out, then I think that's where it stings a little bit more. I think that's where the frustration starts to grow. At the end of the day, does it matter if you're the worst 1 seed or one of the better 2 seeds? Honestly, you might want to be a better 2 seed. And that's something that I mean, that's not a new or a hot take for or anything like that. Like people talk about that all the time of how one of the more desirable positions is to be one of those higher 2 seeds than bottom 1 seeds. But it's a cool thing. And it's something that Tennessee's never been. And the fan base was excited to maybe get that one line. So I think that's a little bit frustrating, but you also have to come away thinking Jordan Gainey had a good game again, and that's good to see that he's coming along maybe down the stretch, and that's 2 straight games that the offense has been pretty impressive, which is a pretty big 180, and Jordan Gainey having good games, I think, is a big part of that, is when you're able to rely on him off the bench to be a little bit of that spark. I think that's a big deal, but I would have liked to see Tennessee get into the paint a little bit more too, is something that you kind of keep thinking about. I thought Felix had a fine game. I think he did his role for the most part offensively. Cade Phillips, I mean, didn't play much, but no shot attempts is a tough look for him. And then Igor didn't do the best job of maybe doing as much at the rim. And it's easy to just look at the tallest guys and put it on them that there wasn't a lot at the rim. But I mean, the guards got to get there too. Jordan Gainey, a day or two after, I think it was Greg Polinsky said that Jordan Gainey is the best driver on the team. He takes all the shots from beyond the arc. So that's something too. That's like, you need something from them. It's not just the bigs, but you'd also like against a team like Ole Miss that maybe doesn't have the size. You'd like to see them take advantage of that. There's a couple things like that where it's frustrating. Fouling shooters again, like what? I mean, you got one game left in the season, it's still an issue. I don't know. It's just a few things like that kind of linger after you watch a game.
Well, I was listening to Field of 68's their immediate stream after the game, and John Henson, former North Carolina great, he made a good point where he was like, I mean, he's watched a lot of basketball, and he was like, I've never seen so many and ones given up in one game, where it wasn't even just that Tennessee was fouling and getting beat. They were just allowing them to finish. Like, if you're going to foul. Like, you can't, the and one stuff was killing Tennessee last night. And Felix got put on skates for a while, and then they put on Jemai, but it was part of, Ryan in the group chat. The other Ryan Chumper was like, it's just a gas situation. Felix is clearly tired. I mean, Felix has had a bunch on his plate all year, and you talk about, the Cade aspect. He had more on his plate last night because Cade lost the trust of Barnes. Barnes even I think talked about it after the game, where it was I think he said something he didn't think his head was in it or something. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was just his head wasn't in the game or something along those lines. And he plays very limited amount of minutes. So guess what? That means way more on Felix's plate. Felix had a bunch on him last night, and so I just give him a pass. Felix has just had it's been really, really tough for him, and I think he's been the most consistent big for Tennessee all year. So Felix is the least of my concerns for Tennessee. I think, like you said, he was solid. Igor, I feel bad for him because he has that crazy 4-point shot, and then I don't know what happened there. That can't happen. I also just wasn't in. I don't know why that was the look you were going out of the timeout. You mentioned Gainey, Gainey did go to the line, though. Gainey was driving and drew foul. So, I mean, he didn't score at the rim, but he did attack the rim and go to the foul line a couple times in this game. And I didn't love the timeout. You knew it was coming. It was just kind of annoying that you just saw on Saturday, Jemai pulls up and the defense doesn't get set. The end of college basketball games is a nightmare. I hate them. They're just, the over timeouts, and this game was one of them where it's just, we're overthinking all of this, and then after all those timeouts and all that, and you're like, that's what we got at the end. Was it all worth it? But with how Gainey has played, and Gainey having a similar play against Illinois, obviously, I don't know why Gainey and or Zakai did not have the ball in their hands. Chaz didn't really have anything going in the second half. He did all of his work in the first half. So I understand, but I mean, he has a quick trigger. So if it was 1 second or 2 seconds, he's probably the one you want to shoot, just because he's going to get the shot off. But I just think Zakai at the rim, he's been great at the rim. Good chance of him drawing a foul, even if he doesn't knock it in. Or Gainey. It's just, I think you live and die with one of those two in that spot. And I understand Igor hit that crazy 4-point play before that, but I don't know. That's just not what you wanted to happen. And I feel bad for him because that was just a rough look and rough way to end the game. And because of he was out of the rotation for the final 8 minutes there, right? That was something where he's clearly kind of fallen out of favor here late in games, and that it felt oh, okay, Igor getting his confidence back. So we talked about it all year. It's Igor can shoot. Igor is a skilled offensive player. He just has not been able to put it all together consistently at all come conference play. And you're okay, maybe this is a good Igor finishing game and he's going to take us home. And it didn't happen that way. And I don't know. In the moment, I understand hindsight's 2020, but I would have, especially with the timeouts and everything else, get the ball in one of your most reliable scores. And those are your guards. That's who it's been all year long. It's been your guards, and you just live with the results there, right?
Yeah. I mean, after that timeout, we're watching in Greenville, and someone asked, they're I mean, what's the play here? Who do you go to? It was the question. And I kind of, you rack over your mind. It was well, it's tough to not say Zakai Ziegler because he's, you live or die through him, and he's hit the big shot already this season. He's taken big shots before, like the one at Auburn you see, which it didn't go down, but like it's a guy that can handle that situation, and he just made one that was a big deal too. So I think you had to be okay with that. And then you think, well, Jordan Gainey's had a really good game. And I thought he brought up a good point. Like, yeah, all of his field goal attempts that go in the stat book are from beyond the arc, but he was getting downhill a little bit and doing his job there to try to get something at the rim. And he's capable of doing that. He's a strong finisher, but he also can shoot, and he was shooting well in that arena that night. So maybe you go to him, or like you said, Chaz Lanier, maybe it's not the first option on the play, but maybe you have him kind of be that second guy to flash. And if that's the opening, you are okay with that shot because he is such a talented shooter. Those were the three guys that it kind of came up, and it was like, yeah, those are the options that I think you go to and you can live with it. Ultimately, you get a nice look from Igor, and it's a shot that 9 out of 10 times, if not more, he's going to make. And I'm sure no one's harder on him than himself right now, one of those situations for missing that shot. But it's definitely not probably the most ideal guy to have the ball in that situation, just because of the stretch of games he's had and the body of work he had on that night. I'm curious to see what, like, in a perfect world, who got the ball and where they got the ball for Rick in that situation. Like, was it to get it to Igor? Because part of me, I mean, you watch the play and I can't imagine that was like they come out of the huddle and it's like, all right, Igor's getting this ball right there. It looked like maybe there was some other things they were trying to get, and that's just kind of how the play unfolded. And that's, sports. Like you draw something up, but how often is that actually what ends up happening? So, I mean, Jemai Mashak's shot's the perfect example of that. That wasn't what Rick drew up, was Jemai Mashak taking a shot from the logo, but it ended up working out. But yeah, so I mean, you live with that shot. It was a good look. It didn't drop, but I can't imagine that was exactly what Rick came out of the huddle thinking was going to be what unfolded.
I just think they should have done, like, the Gainey thing against Illinois. Mashak obviously pulling up against Bama. I would not have done the out of timeout situation. I would have let like one of Gainey, Zakai drive, and then if it's not there, you have Chaz or Igor on the perimeter to fire something with a second or two on the shot clock. Because Mashak kind of took his time getting up. It wasn't like Mashak raced up the court to get the time. It was just a weird sequence of events that, like, I don't know. I just would have put the pressure on Ole Miss to stop Gainey or Zakai from getting downhill and getting an easy two, because I think that with the way Ole Miss was defending too, I think that was still something you didn't have to pull up from three like Jemai did. I think you could have gotten to the rim in a similar fashion to the way Gainey got it against Illinois and I mean, you talked about it with you said Coach Clark, who said that he's been your best driver, right?
I think GP.
Who'd you say? Or Polinsky?
Yeah.
That was like their best driver. So it's like you live with that. And I think all of us would be like, yeah, I understand if he didn't get a foul called and doesn't finish or whatever. Like, that's a great way to go out. Like, I'll live and die with Jordan Gainey at the rim, or the ball in his hands at the end, and or Zakai. I didn't like the series of events there, but I also don't know how Ole Miss got a shot up with 0.04 seconds on the shot clock, because that's, I think, physically impossible without a tip in. Like, it was a very slow 0.4 seconds. I mean, that can't happen. But what also can't happen is you giving up multiple offensive rebounds when you go super big like that, because they went, what was that? Was it Felix, Cade, and Igor in at that moment? Am I misremembering that? Or what? Weren't those three all on the court together?
That sounds right.
They went super big there. And it's like, you went super big, and I'm pretty sure you had Cade, Igor, and Felix on the court at that moment. And that just, it's a backbreaker, but it's just the margins are so thin, Ryan. And that's what just, like, the 1 seed was within your grasp. And I mean, I think it still was a little bit more up in the air than I think a lot of ball fans would like to admit, just because Florida won at Bama. And I don't know. I think Florida's a better team anyway, but I think it's close. But it just, even if Tennessee won out and Florida won out, I lean Florida getting that final 1 seed either way. But now it's just like, you're gonna be a 2 seed, and part of me is just like, Barnes will never do this, and I understand. I don't even know what kind of reprimand you would get, but it would be the Bishop Boswell show in the first tournament game for me. Is like, we're going straight rest, DMPs. We're doing full. We're doing some NBA, just some rest that hey, sorry, man. We got to get right and ready to go for tournament time, because we know we're probably gonna be a 2 seed. And if the tournament doesn't matter, but if you can tell us, like, that's the whole thing, is if the committee comes out and says, Like, there needs to be transparency. Like, come out and say, depending on how you do in the tournament, will still affect where your seeds are. Okay, then we'll go balls to the wall here. But if it's still unclear that you're going to do a Texas A&M situation where they have this great run and it doesn't matter at the end of the weekend anyway, because you already had your preconceived notions about what was going to happen, then also tell us, because Tennessee, more than any other team in the SEC right now, it matters the mileage on these tires. And if they go all the way out and they win the tournament, because they still absolutely can,
Sure.
and then they're still a 2 seed, gigantic waste of time. It doesn't matter, and you just burned a bunch of more miles ahead of the most important time. So I don't know. I don't envy the spot that Barnes is in at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to really try at all in that. And in less than a Bishop Boswell show, I think it could more so be a Darlington Dubar show, because those posts feel like the ones that need the rest more than anyone, because you expected JP Estrella to be there, and you expected him to be a part of that rotation and to give those guys a little bit of a rest. And he obviously is out for the season with a foot injury and has been for pretty much the entire season. So it's been that 3-man show kind of in the post, and those guys look gassed. I think Zakai and guys like that could obviously use a break, but Zakai is way more used to this load than maybe like a Felix Okpara or a Igor Milicic is. So yeah, I mean, there's just doesn't seem like there's no path to a 1 seed for Tennessee, and that's fine, but there's also no path for a 3 seed, it feels like. So what's the point of going all out in the SEC tournament and like you said, adding more miles, and then all of a sudden you're even more gassed and you're playing a 15 seed and maybe you catch the wrong one on the wrong night and you're still gassed. And that, I think the committee needs to kind of set a precedent, or maybe even, just come out and say like, hey, conference tournaments matter or they don't. Like, what is the expectation? And that's why the women's one is so much more competitive. That's why you see South Carolina so often win the SEC women's basketball tournament. One, they're better than everyone else in the conference most years, but also there's an entire week off until the bracket's revealed. So it's worth it for them sometimes to go in and be like, hey, we're going to take pride in this. This is our conference. We just went undefeated in the regular season. We're going to go win the tournament as well. There's no reason for Auburn to do that. They're locked in as a 1 seed. There's really no reason for Florida to do that. They feel kind of locked in as a 1 seed. There's no reason for Tennessee to do that. They're going to be a 2 seed. Alabama's going to be like, none of these teams at the top, it matters really at all for. So it kind of feels like a waste of time in a way. And Tennessee's one of those teams that at the end of the day, like, they probably do just need to go in there, play Darlington Dubar 20 plus minutes and get out of there a little bit more rested and gear up for the tournament that people actually care about. Remember, but that is easier said now that they won a few years ago. It feels weird when you look up at the banners and there's no SEC tournament titles. They got the first one since 1970. So now I feel like once you get the one under your belt, you're able to be like, all right, who cares anymore? So it is a luxury in that sense.
I agree. What do you think is the matchup to watch here with South Carolina? I mean, it feels inevitable, but I mean, they still have to take care of business on Saturday. I mean, they can't drop this one either. You don't want to be reeling going into conference play. But what is there that's of interest to you on Saturday?
I'm interested to see how they do on Colin Murray Boyles. I think that's kind of everyone when they play South Carolina. That's the thing that they look at, because he's projected to be a lottery pick and has had such a good season. He's scoring, I think, like 17 points a game. He leads them in rebounds, and he's, I don't want to say he's a double-double machine, but he's plenty capable of kind of pulling up and getting a double-double on any night, or that kind of caliber of performance at least. So what are they going to do to stop him? And when we're sitting here talking about how the forwards maybe look like they're a little gassed and they look like they need a bit of a rest, well, this isn't an easy matchup. It's not necessarily like a Felix Okpara type of matchup, but that's certainly a guy that, we'll see. Maybe they stick a Jemai on him who could probably use some rest as well, or Igor and stretches and things like that to try to limit him on the glass. But what is your solution for him? Do you have a solution for him? Do you just say he's going to get his and you got to limit everyone else because the roster's not the deepest this year? It'll be interesting to see how they go about stopping kind of what feels like a one-man wrecking ball for South Carolina season. That it's been brutal for them. Like it's very underwhelming given what they did last year and how competitive they were in the SEC a year ago. But man, I mean, the SEC, they're easily at the bottom. Yeah, you catch them on the wrong night and you don't come out and you don't play well, and maybe those senior day festivities get to you a little bit, like it felt like they did when Tennessee played Kentucky last year on senior day. I mean, South Carolina's plenty capable of beating anyone. The record can fool you because of how strong the SEC is, but it's a good team.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of wild. He's kind of alternating because first year 11-21, 4-14 in SEC play. Obviously, were great last year, and then it's back to the basement. Maybe they're just going to alternate in. I don't know. Yeah, it's a Mizzou situation. Maybe I don't know. Mizzou's been, I think, a little bit better in the alterations, but I mean, Mizzou last year was, woof, woof.
I mean, but you look at what South Carolina did. I mean, even recently, they lost to Georgia's not the best. I mean, Georgia's not a bad team, too. Like they're a tournament team, most likely, but and they needed that game really bad to survive that, and you drop it by like 10 points. But they beat the crap out of Arkansas the other week. So and Arkansas again. I mean, that's not a team that's firing on all cylinders, but that's an example of like, hey, they can go out there and win. Their other SEC win when they beat Texas, like they beat the crap out of Texas. So they can put up points. They can, they can hang around. They've played some tight games too. Like I think A&M they played pretty tight. When you think back, Florida I remember was a really good game. Like teams that struggle, they played Auburn well too. So like that's a team that they've caused fits for some of the top teams, and Tennessee certainly fits the bill for a team that could come out flat for the first 5 minutes of any given game or something like that. And then all of a sudden South Carolina hits some shots and you got to climb your way out of a hole like we've seen the Lady Vols have to do a little bit recently. And, you just don't want to put yourself in that situation on a senior day where you're celebrating Zakai Ziegler, Jemai Mashek, Chazlanier, Jordan, all these guys that whether it's 1, 2, or 4 years have done so much for this program. And you come out flat on senior day against the worst team in the league. That would be a kind of a tough pill to swallow, I think, 2 years in a row.
Yeah, don't do what Alabama did with their senior night right after the game, and that's a tough visual, man. I don't know who thought about that, but that's a wild galaxy brain thought. Just like after the game, to do that.
I hated that the Lady Vols did it. It feels. I understand where you see Josiah Jordan-James crying 5 minutes before tip off because it's obviously a very emotional thing, and you want to try to avoid that. But it just feels like more of a distraction and more looming over the game when it's after the game. Like that. I don't like it after the game.
Is the middle ground like halftime? I mean, I guess they can't really do halftime either because they got.
It's a tough thing because like also it's like, okay, we'll just do like an hour before the game, but then no one's there. Like no one's showing an hour before the game. I think the way to do it is like 3 home games before your last game. Because then it's, hey, shout out Zakai. We're doing senior day. We're shouting out Zakai. We're shouting out Jemai. We're doing all this. But also you're in that moment and I'm sure it's still emotional, but you also kind of go, well, got 2 more games here.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of neutralizes it. It wouldn't hit as hard, but I think if you're just strictly in the business of tipping your cap to the seniors and then winning basketball games, that's probably the best way to do it. I think that's the way you kind of avoid falling into those senior day traps.
That's fair. Well, you mentioned the Lady Vols. It did not end well in Greenville, where you just got back from here, Ryan, Sylvia. I mean, they made it somewhat interesting down the stretch. They dug another big hole against Vanderbilt on this Thursday afternoon, sir. But what did you make of Tennessee going down early here in the SEC tournament?
Yeah, I mean they look like a different team than we've seen for most of the year. They are falling into some of the same old traps. The poor starts to games are so frustrating to watch because it feels like clockwork almost. Like, yeah, they're going to fall into a 10-point deficit in the first quarter. They're going to fight out of it. And then at halftime or the third quarter, they're going to tie it up. And it's a whole new ball game from there, where if they just took care of business out the jump, then maybe they don't have to be tied up in the third quarter. And they're the one with the 10-point lead that they're trying to defend it. And you hear some players in the locker room stuff talk about that, but it's just they look a little gassed. The biggest, most interesting thing that Kim Caldwell said in the post-game press conference, I'll find the exact quote because I don't want to misquote her with this. She said it was about kind of how they've handled load management. God, let me see. It's right here. She said, I think we haven't really handled our load the way we should have in hindsight. I think we're tired and need a rest, get healthy, just get a reset. So I think that's interesting. Like it's like pretty it's cool to see a coach admit that maybe they regret a little bit how they've handled things because they look a step behind at times. You saw Vanderbilt run out against the press and beat it by just running past people a few times, and then you're out of position. You're either fouling from behind or you have those open looks under the basket. So is it going to be a learning curve for Kim in the future years? Is she going to change some things up to try to keep some legs under her players? They have some time off, which I think is really nice for them, and surely something that Kim's excited about. As we mentioned earlier, there is that gap between the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament for women's basketball, so I think that's good. But it's been ugly recently. It doesn't feel like the same team that beat UConn, and that was just like a month ago. So it's just been a weird thing to watch as it feels like. I mean, Kim's agreed. Someone asked her, like, does this feel like a regression? And she was like, it feels like it's the team from closer to the beginning of the year that needed to learn some lessons. And all of a sudden it's like, I mean, you got one more guaranteed game and it's going to probably be a 5 seed against a 12 seed. Like that can be tough. That can be tricky. You've seen in the men's tournament all the time where teams get caught in that matchup and they've got to figure it out. They've got a week to do it, but something's got to change with them. Whether it's just getting their legs on them, getting refreshed or whatever it is. I mean, they got to figure it out.
It is interesting though, Ryan, and because like Kim Caldwell talked about it today in terms of like this team's just tired, right? And I kind of wonder because I think there are some fans who kind of raise an eyebrow at that of like, okay, well, is that the scheme? Like, is that bodies just that you have right now? Is it just you're not as talented as you need to be, so you're having to go a little bit harder? Like, I don't have the answer to that, but I do think it's interesting that this style, which is going like before she got here, that was the question is like, is this sustainable? Like, are you going to be able to press like this, play this hard-nosed defense, shoot a bunch of threes, still have your legs? Because I mean, that's part of the worry of the high volume of threes when you're playing such hard, intense defense all the time, is that you get tired legs in the second half. You get tired legs, and it's harder over the course of the season to withstand this. I mean, Barnes is running the Tom Thibodeau New York Knicks stuff right now. Like he is college basketball Tom Thibodeau, and there's not anybody any closer. Like he's okay going 7. Like I think enjoys more of 7 to 8 guys he really trusts and can play a bunch of minutes. Like I don't think he's ever once hesitated about playing Zakai Ziegler 38 minutes a night. But I do wonder on when you look at with the Lady Vols, like I don't know, because like the early part of the year, people were like, whoa, we're subbing so much. It's like hockey shifts over here. And people were like, is this going to continue? Or are you going to be able to get away with this many just subs in and out? And obviously that kind of normalized and changed as the year went on. I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing because I think it's more extreme in Kim's case with her style than Barnes. But I do wonder, just kind of like with this style, because it's a long season and your ultimate goal is still to win it all one day at Tennesse. What do you make of the style and just the tired aspect? Do you think it's just, hey, just the way things have gone this year, it's just the team, the schedule, and this is not really scheme related? Or do you think there might be something to the scheme? So when she's saying that the team is tired, that it's like, well, then maybe you need to make some changes for next year to ensure that they're not this gassed here in early part of March, the most important part of the year, because they have more bodies than Barnes has right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it's probably the scheme. I mean, you have to assume that wears down on you, and it's probably easier to get away with that at the Division II or the Marshall level of basketball. Like that's probably an easier gauntlet to run through. And I think Kim would admit that, like, you hear about how physical the SEC is, you hear about how tough it is to play, but you don't really know until you've done it, until you've lived out that schedule. And she's done that now, and that's what year one's for. And you see that across all sports, and you see the year one. That's why things go in the right direction when they do, is because they take notes and they learn and they grow from it. So I think it's reasonable to think that, not that she'll abandon the press or her scheme or her system or anything like that. Like that'll still be what they do, but maybe there's little tinkers here and there and little things that she hey, last year we sub this amount, maybe it needs to be more, maybe it needs to be less, or whatever it is that she feels like puts her team in a spot where they're prepared for this time of year. But you also have to look at the other side of things. Like, sure, the Lady Vols are going to be gassed, and you look at, let's say the NCAA tournament, they have this break, so you would think that they'll be pretty good to go. Like the wind will be back in their sails. You play that first game, 2 days later, you play that second game. Who is that going to affect more is my question. Are the Lady Vols going to be more affected because they had to play 2 games in 3 days where they ran that system? Or is the team that played the game 2 days before that they're playing now that they have to play that system that they're not prepared for, that they haven't practiced all year, is it going to get their opponent? I'm curious to see like how, I guess, where's the conditioning at for both sides? Because the Lady Vols are used to this. They do it every day, and that has its detriments and its positives. Whatever team they're playing probably isn't nearly as conditioned as they are. So could we get to a place in March Madness NCAA tournament where that second game of those weekends, that's where they see a lot of success, and that's where they could create that upset where they're probably going to have to be on the road as a 5-4 seed in a true road game. Maybe they catch a team like Duke or North Carolina because they're still kind of reeling after a game 2 days ago, and the Lady Vols are used to that type of work.
I don't. Which way do you think it ultimately goes, Ryan? Like, what's your gut in next year?
This year, the way they're playing, it feels like they're probably a second round team. Like, I think if they can truly return to where they're playing well, and then they're plenty capable of catching a 4 seed and then getting to a Sweet 16. Then you're playing a 1 seed, and that's really tough, and we'll see what happens there. But like, they went on the road and they played Texas really well, and that was without Kim. And they've played South Carolina really well. They beat UConn. They played LSU. So like, they've proven they can hang in these games. So I'm not saying that a farther run isn't possible, but right now it feels like a round of 32 team, with a possibility of upsetting that on the road aspect too. Makes it much tougher than the men's, of course. But in turn, I don't know. It's tough to say because I think you've seen both sides of it. Like, you saw the side of it against an A&M team that isn't good and they're missing their best player. Like, you beat a SEC team by 40 in the SEC tournament. I think part of that is A&M is getting off a really long emotional season that didn't go the way they expected it to, and they just suffocated. And the Lady Vols just did whatever they wanted, partially due to that scheme. I think you saw against Vanderbilt, a Vandy team that had that extra day of rest against the Tennessee team that played the day before, and Tennessee just wasn't able to kind of have enough in their tank to get to the finish line. So I think we've already seen in the last couple of days both sides of it. So it's tough to say like this is how it plays out. But this year, I mean, it feels like this year more than any would be the year that maybe things don't go their way just because of, like we talked about, you learn all those lessons in year one. Maybe that's part of the lessons that Tennessee and Kim Caldwell and her staff have to learn.
Yeah. It's just funny. Like, it all matters. And it's just recency. It's the way our brains work is like that down the stretch. This is what you remember. And this is what's frustrating. But it's like, remember this team, like you said, I mean, they go in, they close in Brooklyn against Iowa in really impressive fashion with Talia Cooper coming through. Talia had a great year. You beat UConn. You've had these great games. Like you said, they play Texas well. They play South Carolina extremely well. I think there's a lot of positives just down the stretch. It's just been kind of rough. And you hope that it kind of gets turned around and they can do a little bit of damage in the tournament and get maybe get past the round of 32. We'll see. Final thing, Sara Puckett though, who we kind of wonder before the year like how she fit in particular in Kim Caldwell's scheme, going from Kelly Harper. Now that you've had a full scope of it, Ryan, how do you think she played as a whole? Because I think she was kind of she got mixed reviews, I think, from a lot of fans throughout the year, and her fit and how that ultimately worked for her. What did you make of her season as a whole?
I mean, it's been a rough year for her, and it's been challenging at times. She's not scoring as much as we've seen her in the past. She's sitting at 5 points a game on under 40% shooting from the field. She's made some big shots. She had a big shot against UConn when Tennessee won it. So I think that maybe some of the criticism has been a little much at times. Like, she's played her role. She's been a good teammate, which is, sometimes rare, not nowadays. And especially as the season marches on and eyes start to creep towards, futures, whether I know Sara Puckett's out of eligibility, but whether that's, future and possibilities with the transfer portal or life after basketball, things like that, sometimes that's not what you see, but she's been good and she's played her role. And I'm sure she's sitting here and looking at the NCAA tournament and wishing that things went better in her senior year and she could have played more of a role. Like her minutes are starting to go down. Like you've seen Avery Strickland eat into some of those minutes recently, and Avery's, she's come in and she's actually done a pretty good job despite not playing much this year. Like she came in the SEC tournament and she was a bit of a disruptor on defense at times and kind of did what she was asked to do. But yeah, Sara, it hasn't looked easy at times. It's disappointing in a way where you see how high her ceiling could have been, especially when she got to campus and she hit that big shot against Belmont, and then she built off of it for a nice sophomore year, and like you could see the trajectory, and then maybe it didn't pan out exactly how things did, but she's had a good Lady Vols career, and she'll definitely be an impact for the Lady Vols going forward. Whether that's you can't imagine it's going to be playing like 15 minutes a game, 15 plus minutes a game, but in those 8 to 10 to 12 minutes, like she could be the difference at times, and she could come and hit a huge trailing three, which has kind of been her where she gets her offense, or she could battle on the glass. Like she's capable of being someone that does make a difference. It'll be interesting to see what her role looks like once they get that kind of reset here in this week and try to really make that push in March.
Finally, it's not on a rundown, but I was curious because this is the last thing that I saw fans were kind of upset about. What did you think about Kim and Kelly being on the panel together briefly?
I mean, it's like, I don't understand why people were like, ESPN can't do that. Like, Kelly signed up to be on the SEC Now set the SEC tournament, and
she knew this was a possibility.
And Kim won a game, so she talks on the SEC Now set. Like, I don't know. I thought that like it was what both parties signed up for. Like, I'm sure I don't know how much, if at all, if they've talked or anything like that. But I mean, that it's sports. It's the business of things. I can't imagine that Kelly's sitting around with hate in her heart for Kim Caldwell and her. Like, I can't imagine that that's the case. Like, it is her alma mater. It's where she won 3 national championships as a player. So it's tough to think that she's like rooting against Tennessee or anything like that. So I thought they handled it professionally as you'd expect both parties to. But yeah, I did see some of that on Twitter, and it made me laugh. And it's a funny visual to see, the past and the present of Lady Vols coaching. But I didn't think it was any malicious play from ESPN or anything like that.
Yeah, they're adults, and it was hard. And your first point, I think, is the nail on the head, which is she knew what she signed up for. Kelly Harper's not doing media, SEC media, if she doesn't know that there's a possibility that she's going to be in a setting where she's sitting next and talking to and asking questions to the person who replaced her. So I mean, and that's a kudos to her. I think it's going to be kind of like there's a scenario where it's a Pearl Barnes situation sooner rather than later, where she might get the Mizzou job or something. Like she might be a SEC head coach again, and then they're competing against each other. And I think she'll, like you said, she won 3 titles here. She'll always have love and a soft spot for Tennessee. But it's like if she didn't want to do that or be in that position, she wouldn't have signed up for that position. So I just feel like it was protective, and I get like the whole, it was kind of like from the outside that sounds awkward, but I don't think it was bad. I think it was fine.
No, and yeah, and this, I mean, it feels like, once again, I don't know exactly what Kelly Harper's thinking or doing right now, but with all the tie-ins that she's had with coaching jobs that are popping up this time of year, like it feels like she probably wants to get back into coaching in some form of fashion, whenever that is, whether that's this off season or in the past. But it feels like she's pulling that, you've seen this out of the coaching playbook so many times where, you lose that job and then you go and you do some media work and you kind of keep your foot in the door and stay in the public eye and things like that. And then you take that next job and you kind of go from there. It feels like that's kind of what she's doing. And it's a good gig, and it's been fun. Like it's been I don't keep up. I don't know if they're even public, but like the SEC Now schedule of who's going to be on the halftime shows. So it's fun when, you're watching a Lady Vols road game that I'm not able to travel for, some other women's game, and she pops up at halftime. It's always interesting to hear what she has to say. And, you do turn your ear a little bit more when Tennessee's game comes up, and it's like, all right, what's she going to say about Tennessee? And it does make it more interesting too, when it's like half the players out there she's coached and she recruited and things like that. So she has a good perspective on what Jewel Spear brings to the table for Tennessee, even though it's in a different system. Like, she's coached her. She knows Jewel Spear and Sara Puckett and Tess Darby very well. So it is interesting to hear her opinions when she does give them on Tennessee.
Ryan, Sylvia, what can the good folks check out from you and the wonderful folks over there at Vol Report this week?
Yeah, March Madness obviously coming up for the men's team rounding out their regular season. But spring football, it's here tomorrow morning, Friday morning. Spring football is upon us. We'll see what's going on the practice field. We'll talk to Josh Heupel, get his thoughts on his team heading into spring and everything around football. So baseball, of course, softball, of course. It's the true crossover season right now as we're in the beginning stages of March. So everything Tennessee athletics over at volreport.com.
Oh, and cancel the orange and white game. This whole not televising everything else. What are we doing? Just cancel it. If you're not going to, just cancel it. What are we doing? We're going above and beyond to just not, what? Just cancel it if you're going to do this.
You have two options as a college football program right now. Get rid of it, whatever. Who cares? Yeah. Not a lot of people like it anyway. Or just lean all the way into the stupidness and do the Ole Miss, playing tug of war at midfield and, half the game's not even football and just make it a full fest for fans. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Like, get the linemen out there to have a hot dog eating contest or something. And
I mean, this just ticks fans off though. Like, this is a lose. Like, what are we doing?
Like wasting my time, but also it's dumb. It is a waste of time. It's silly, but that's what I think is you either have to go all in or all out. And
Hubs made a great one. If you're going to take it off TV, Hubs on the Vol Quest thing, I agree with this. It's like, make it a scrimmage where only select people can be in. Like, only fan, like you just have a scrimmage. Like, it's just behind, the fall scrimmage, like that big part of the year. Just do that. Do a spring scrimmage that actually they go hard and they're competing and the new guys are playing, and do that. Like a closed door scrimmage. That I'd be okay with that. And then hear some scuttlebutt on how people did in that, and that's all you need.
And they do that too, like you said, in the fall and things like that. And then we go in, we talk to Heupel, and he tells you everyone did good, of course.
Yeah, just do that.
Things come out, and you talk to people and you hear things, and you find out what went down, and that feels.
Basketball does it, right? The Michigan State game, what was that? Last year or 2 years ago?
Michigan State was the charity game they did.
Yeah.
Year, and then they did Indiana this year, which those have been fun. But then they always do the closed doors. I think the Lady Vols had one with maybe UNC before this year. I can't remember, thinking back, and they always do ones like that where it's like those closed door scrimmages, but somehow, some way the scores always leak and the stat lines always leak and things like that. So it's non-televised. It's just a waste of time when they kind of just put it on just for the sake of putting it on.
Yeah. Agree. Go subscribe, volreport.com today, and support Ryan, Noah, and all the good folks over there each and every day. Ryan, thank you as always, my friend, and I will talk to you next week.
Thanks, Chase. See ya.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.